Hey, what's up, guys? It's Bradu. I'm doing a little something different here tonight. Instead of a drawing or opening baseball card packs, I am doing a demo of a game I came up with. It's a dice tabletop, I guess, pen and paper game called Bradu's Simple NHB. Basically, the idea of the game is you use dice and cards that I filled out myself to simulate and get results of matches of early UFC style fights, which was called NHB back in the day, in the 2000 and before. The first UFC was in 1993, so that's kind of what I started with when I came up with this game. And I've worked on, doing the ratings for fighters from 93 and 94, pretty much so far. So, to show the game and how it works, I thought I would redo UFC 1. Like, this is kind of an alternate universe UFC 1. So we have Rozier and Ken Shamrock here. Two of the key players in UFC 1. So, let's see if I can do a good job explaining this. I feel like I wrote up rules. I feel like this is one of those things where if you see how I play through it, it's a lot more simple than the rules make it sound, if that makes sense. You need some dice, like a standard set of D&D dice works. Actually, kind of a couple sets, because you need a couple 20-sided dice, a couple 10-sided dice, and a 6-sided. And there are, I think there are apps you can have on your phone that roll, like, dice simulators or random number generators that would work just fine if you're not nerdy like me and don't actually have dice on hand. So anyway, let's get into it and you'll see kind of how it goes. Let's take a look at a Gracie card so I can explain the ratings to you first of all. So here's Gracie. There's 5 ratings for each card for each fighter. I really wanted to simplify this down to something that could be done in just a few rolls. It's not a play-by-play. It's not a move-by-move, like simulating the entire fight like that. It's more like generating a quick but believable, realistic result for the fight. So anyway, we have C is control. This is 1 to 20. Gracie is, I think, the highest control rating that I've made so far at 14. Now my idea was, it's a 1 to 20 rating, but eventually I might get up to doing modern MMA, so I wanted to rate them accordingly, right? So if I did a modern, like a GSP might be a 19 or 20. A prime George St. Pierre had a much higher control than Gracie. But for this time period, Gracie at 14 is very, very high. Striking, also 1 to 20. He's only a 4. He was not a good striker. Striking, stand-up. That's stand-up striking. G is ground game. And that incorporates, wrestling and submissions and jiu-jitsu and whatever. It's basically how good he is on the ground, regardless of what skill set he uses. KI is killer instinct. That's only a 1 to 10. So Hoyt's is very high at an 8. Basically, how likely are you to finish your opponent and how fast? And then T is toughness. How likely are you to survive and not be finished quickly? So those are the ratings. And you'll see kind of how the different fighters rate according to each other. Alright, so our first fight is going to be Gordeau versus Tuli. In the real UFC, this one lasted, 10 or 15 seconds? Gordeau. Tuli raced across the cage, throwing punches. Gordeau kind of backtracked and and counterpunched as they got to the other side of the cage and caught him with a shot, and Tuli kind of fell into the fence. And then as he sat up, Gordeau just kicked him right in the tooth. Teeth went flying into the front row and got lodged into Gordeau's foot. So, yeah, it could be quick, could be one-sided. However, I've definitely run this card a few times and feel that Tuli won once or twice. So, and again, it could happen, right? I like that aspect of it. So here's the deal. Here's how it goes. Each fighter gets a 10-sided die, and the first thing we roll for is control. And we're going to roll a 10-sided die and add it to their control rating to see who, basically to see who dictates where the fight is going to take place, at least at the start. So Gordeau has a 7 and a 5 is a 12. Taylor Tuli 1 and 4 is 5. So Gordeau has control. Now he gets to choose, do you want to keep it standing or do you want to take it to the ground? Well, it's pretty easy to decide. So if you're controlling Gordeau, he's got a 7 stand-up and Tuli has a 1. And Gordeau has a 3 stand-up and Tuli has a 2, or ground, and Tuli has a 2. So Gordeau has a much bigger edge standing. So I'm going to pick standing for Gordeau because he has control. You see how that kind of makes sense? Like he has an edge no matter where it goes, but standing he has a much bigger edge. So the next thing you do is bring in the big 20-sided dice, and you're going to do kind of the same thing. You're going to roll and add it to their stand-up rating. And Gordeau, because he got control, he gets a +2 to this roll as well. So let's roll it up and see what happens. So Gordeau has a 10. He rolled a 10. He has a 7 stand-up, and he gets a +2. So Gordeau, I'll just write it here, Gordeau, and I call these fight points. Got 19 fight points, and Tuli he rolled a 15, and he has a 1. So he has 16 fight points. What we can gather from that is Gordeau is winning or did better so far, but it's relatively close, and they both did, some damage or whatever. It's not going to be the 10-second fight it was in the first UFC. But Gordeau has a chance for the finish here. So the next thing we're going to do is roll 10-sided dice. Gordeau rolls a 10-sided die and adds it to his killer instinct. And I'll show you what I do here. He rolled a 4. Killer instinct is a 6. That's 10. He also gets a +1 to that rating for doing over 10 points on his fight points. If he had got 20, he would add 2. So he's at 10, 11. I'll write that over here. And Taylor Tuli has a toughness of 2. And he'll roll 4, so he's a 6. So 11 minus 6 equals 5. So what we're doing here is a check between Gordeau's killer instinct, his ability to finish a fight, and Tuli's toughness, his ability to absorb punishment and survive. Well, it's a positive number. I gotta look at the chart here. He finished the fight. That much we know. He finished the fight. Let's see. Stand up. Oh, and he finished it in, the time of the finish has to do with this number here. Like, basically, if the killer instinct roll is very high compared to the toughness roll, it means he dominated. Oh no, sorry, I have that wrong. The fight points roll is what has to do with how long the fight lasted. So Gordeau was a 19, Tuli was a 16. So that's a 3-point difference. So that means this fight lasted 8 minutes, roughly. So I'll write 8 minutes over here. And we could do seconds if we wanted to. I don't really care. I'm just generalizing that it lasted about 8 minutes or into the 8th minute. And if you want to do seconds, it's actually quite simple. You take a 6-sided die, and you'll subtract 1, and a 10-sided die for the ones place. So 10th place, 1 place on seconds. So we'll just do it just to show you. 8 minutes and 0. So 1 minus 1 is 0, and 1. 8:01. So you finished the fight at 8:01. And at a 5, we were at stand-up. So I have a little chart here. Stand-up finish, so they were standing up, and he was a 5. 5 plus is a KO. So Gordeau wins by KO in 8 minutes and 1 second. That's our first fight. Now that was a long-winded, I mean it took me 10 minutes to explain all that and get to the first fight. But really, if you look at how many rolls it was 2 or 3 rolls. It was over pretty quick. I could do it in a minute or less. Next fight is going to be Kevin Rozier versus Zane Frazier in real life. This was a pretty evenly contested fight. Frazier kind of took it to Rozier for a few minutes. He beat him up real bad, but Rozier was tough and took the punishment. Frazier got tired, and then Rozier came back. So that's how I rated them here. They both have a control of 3. Very low skill levels, but not the worst. Better than Tuli. Frazier was a better striker. He's more technical. Rozier is slightly better on the ground, I guess. I don't know. Killer instinct, Rozier seemed to have a little bit more because Frazier couldn't finish him. And toughness, Rozier, that's where he has the edge, right? He kind of took everything Frazier had to throw at him. So I gave him a 4. He's tough as hell, but his skill level's still very low. So even though he could take a lot of punishment, he's still very finishable against a skill fighter. So a 4 I thought was about right, whereas Zane Frazier is very low skill level, and he got tired quickly, and he got finished in real life. That's kind of how I came up with the ratings. So anyway, let's see how they do. Let's see who gets control. Oh, it's a tie. And this shows an extra thing anyway that I want to describe. So they both rolled a 0, which actually is 10. So in the case of rolling a 10, you would roll again and add it anyway. So they're both a 13 on control, right? 10 plus 3. But since it's a tie, we'd have to re-roll anyway. But anytime a fighter rolls a 10, they get to re-roll and add it. That way it makes the opportunity for somebody who is a very low level to gain control against a guy who's got a 10 or higher more control. So like Gracie is a 14 control. Tuli's a 1. If Tuli rolled a 10 and then rolled again, he could theoretically get control over Hoist for a round or a period of time. So anyway, so they're going to both roll again because they both rolled 10s. So Rozier is the blue die. He won the control round. So Rozier's got control. Stand up, they're pretty even. Well, Frazier has a slight edge standing. Rozier has a slight edge on the ground, so he's going to try and take this down. That's how I would see this going. He gets a +2 to his roll also. So now we'll roll for on the ground battling. Each roll a 20-sided die. Haha, look at Rozier with his 1. That's funny. He slipped. So Rozier has a ground 2, and he had control, that's 2, and he rolled a 1. So he only had 5 fight points. Zane Frazier said, "You want to take me down?" He has only a 1 for ground, but he rolled a 13, so he's got a 14. So Frazier actually had a big edge. Basically what happened is Rozier tried to take him down, ended up on the bottom, and Frazier probably pounds on him. Now let's see if he can finish him. And we do that again with rolling the 10-sided die. So Frazier, having won the fight points, having more fight points, has a chance to finish the fight here. So he's going to roll and add to his killer instinct. He rolls a 3, so it's a 7. And Rozier is going to roll to his toughness, and then it's a 6. Ooh, he got the finish. So 7 minus 6 equals 1. Now, if it's a negative number or a 0, that means that the lower fighter survived. So Rozier almost survived the beating, but he did not quite. Let's see. Let's do time first. So we now know that there is a finish because that number is a positive number. Frazier had a higher killer instinct and Rozier had toughness. And 14 minus 5 is 9. It's a quick fight. It lasted only 2 minutes. And let's go ahead and do the seconds just because. 2 minutes and 50 seconds. Remember, we subtract 1 here. 2 minutes, 50 seconds. Frazier gets the win by, and it was only 1 point, and they were on the ground. So let's see what happens. Ground finish, and he's a striker. So I'm going to roll. Oh no, I'm not going to roll. It's just a 1. Ground and pound, TKO. So he basically, like I said, Rozier basically took him down, ended up on the bottom, and Frazier pounded him out. Took him almost 3 minutes. So we now have our first matchup in the semis, going to be Gordeau and Frazier. So Frazier, we already have a mild upset, I guess, because in the real UFC, Rozier won. But they, like I said, they were very, very evenly matched. So no surprise to me that Zane Frazier won. And also 3 minutes, seems totally believable. Alright, now we got Hoist and Art Jimmerson. Good old Mr. One Glove. Alright. I'm going to speed it up a little bit now that I've done a couple fights. You can kind of see what I'm doing. Control. Hoist, 14 plus 9, 23. Art Jimmerson, 1 plus 6. Hoist has control for sure. You know what he's going to do. He's going to take him down. So Hoist is now looking for a ground fight. And it's going to be Hoist has rolled an 11. 15 is 26 plus 2 for having control, 28. And Art Jimmerson, ground 1 plus 9 is 10. Jimmerson rolled a 9. So, now can Hoist finish him off? Probably so, with a big edge there, 28 to 10. This might be a quick one. Hoist Killer Instinct is a 15. And Jimmerson Toughness is a 9. 15 minus 9 equals 6. So he did finish him because we have a positive number there. Hoist Gracie is going to win. And what is he? How is he going to win? Let's see. Ground finish. Oh, let's do the time. Let's stay consistent. I've been checking time before what the finish is. So he was 28 to 10. So that means, this is the chart I'm looking at. Sorry, I've got them just on these silly note cards. Fight points difference of 18, right? So we only have 1 through 10 here. But an 11 plus means, I have it on the back, 11 plus is less than 1 minute. So to figure out how long it lasts, if it was less than a minute, we're going to do that thing I did earlier where we just roll the seconds. So minus 1 there is 10, 11 seconds. Hoist Gracie took no time at all to beat Jimmerson. And oh yeah, I can see a quick sub there. And well, let's find out. Is it a sub? Probably. I gotta flip through my cards here. Ground finish. For a submission fighter, that's what this chart is. Ground, and I have all these charts in the rule book, so if you download the rules, you'll have access to all these charts. But ground finish for a sub guy, we were a 6, so 1 to 7 is a sub. Yep, 6. So, and Hoist Gracie is a jiu-jitsu fighter, so we have another chart to go to. For submissions, we'll just roll a 20-sided 1 rear naked choke. So, Hoist Gracie got a rear naked choke in 11 seconds. Basically, took him down right away, took his back. Art Jimmerson was like, what the hell's going on? And tapped out immediately. Totally believable. Last fight of the first round, Ken Shamrock, Pat Smith. This is the best, well, this makes sense for sort of the main event of the first round. Frazier and Rozier was a very evenly contested match. Shamrock is certainly favored over Pat Smith. Pat Smith was a guy who probably won more than he's lost in the UFC. He's no slouch. Anyway, alright. Rolling for control. Shamrock at 13. Smith at 12. Very close, but Shamrock does get control. He's not going to try and stand with Pat Smith. Smith will actually have the edge. So Shamrock getting this to the ground quick. Shamrock is a 12 on the ground. Smith is a 5. Shamrock rolls a 12, so 12 plus 12 plus 2 for control is 26. Pat Smith, 19. Just missed the critical hit. So let's see. Write it down before I get too ahead of myself. Shamrock, 26. Pat Smith is a 19 plus 5, 24. Very close. So, I haven't mentioned this, but the way that I view the fights taking place, this number with this roll and everything, these fight point numbers make for not only how lopsided is the fight, like Royce Gracie at 28 to Jimmerson at 10, a difference of 18. That's a very lopsided fight. Royce had no problem. He dispatched him quickly and easily. But Shamrock, 26, Pat Smith, 24, a very competitive fight. And not only that, but they're both above 20. That's also a good fight. They both did significant damage or whatever in this fight. That's kind of how I view it. Okay, so let's see. So Shamrock won the round or whatever. We don't really have rounds, but this segment of the fight, he won, but barely. So let's see if he can get the finish. Killer Instinct is 8. Plus 10. 18. Plus he gets to roll again for that 0. So he'll finish for sure, 26. This is going to be kind of not make a lot of sense because of what I just said about it being competitive. Oh, it is. Pat Smith rolled a 10. You can't see that. Oh, it fell. And his toughness 2, he gets to roll again, so he's a 12. Plus 7 is 19. 26 minus 19. Wow. Is a 7. So, still definitely a finish. But it was a competitive fight. And by competitive, it's going to be a quick fight too, isn't it? No, it's not. It's not going to be a very quick fight. What that's going to mean is that Pat Smith did significant damage and was a threat in this fight and ended up losing. So the minutes comes down to the fight point difference, which was only 2. So this one went 9 minutes. That's right. So it was very closely contended. And we'll do this. We'll continue with doing the seconds. I don't usually do the seconds unless it's under a minute. I don't really care if it's a 5-minute fight or 5 minutes and 23 seconds, right? But just for kicks. So this is why we subtract 1 to the 6-sided, because we ended up with a 67 here. Well, that does 67 seconds doesn't make sense, right? So we subtract 1, so it's 57. So 9:57, almost 10 minutes, which is a really long time in UFC 1. And the fight difference between Killer Instinct and Toughness was 7. We were on the ground, and Shamrock is a sub guy, so he did get a submission. And I go back to the chart for, I have this chart for generic subs. This kind of works for everybody, especially at the early stage in the sport. I have a chart for generic, which is kind of most fighters, and then I have a chart for wrestlers, and then I have a chart for jiu-jitsu, Gracie jiu-jitsu guys. So I'll use the jiu-jitsu one for Royce, but pretty much everybody else will use the generic subs here. And a 10 triangle choke. Alright, so Shamrock wins by a triangle. And we have our second round matchup set. And it's pretty similar to what we saw in actual UFC 1, only Frazier beat Rozier. So, second round, Gordeau and Frazier. We haven't had a fight yet go past the 10-minute mark. In which case, if it happens, and it might, with Shamrock and Gracie coming up, that could go past 10 minutes for sure. They fought twice. And the second fight went 30 minutes. you'll see how we handle it. We basically run the fight again. So you assume that it goes 10 minutes and it's one fighter may have had an edge, but then they continue fighting. Alright, so Gordeau and Frazier. For control, Gordeau with a 5 plus 4 is 9. Frazier 3 plus 7 is 10. Frazier actually wins the control, but here's the problem. Gordeau is 2 better standing and 2 better on the ground than Frazier, so where does he even want it? I guess probably standing, because his stand-up is better than his ground, so he'd probably go with what he's more comfortable with, but it doesn't really matter. The difference is 2 either way. But for getting control, he actually evens the score, so they're both going to have a 7 as we roll their stand-up. So we're standing up. Gordeau's blue, Frazier's silver, and Frazier's got the chance to win this. Wow. So Gordeau is an 18, and Frazier is a 23. 16 plus 5 is 21, plus 2 is 23, yep. Now let's see if he can finish it. So Frazier is going to roll a 10-sided and add to his killer instinct. 5 plus 4 is 9. Gordeau, toughness. Oh, look, he survived. 10 plus 2 is 12. Plus, anytime you roll a 10, you get to roll again. 17. So 9 minus 17 equals, doesn't really matter. It's a negative number. So Gordeau survived. So even though Frazier dominated that first, so I call it segments or rounds. I don't want to say round because that's confusing. You think that like a bell rings and they go back to their corner. There were no rounds in the early UFC. But I still had to come up with a way to make it make sense as I'm simulating a fight. So I came up with the idea, at least for the early UFCs, to do 10-minute segments. So what this means, this is the first time I'm glad that this happened so we can describe it. So since Gordeau survived a negative number over here, his toughness roll was much higher than Frazier's killer instinct roll. So Gordeau survived the first segment of the fight, which is 10 minutes. So Frazier has the edge early on, but we're going into the next 10 minutes of the fight. We're going at least past 10 minutes. So we start the whole process over. However, Frazier, having controlled the fight so far, probably has at least a slight edge to be able to continue controlling, if that makes sense. Like, it's a little bit less likely that somebody makes a complete turnaround, right? So to simulate that, I always give a +2 bonus to whoever won the first round or segment of action. Frazier won that round of action, or that segment of action, so he gets a +2 to his control right now. So now Gordeau's a 5 control, and Frazier's also a 5 control because of that +2. So it's even, they're on even ground. And Frazier, with an 8 roll, is going to gain control again. And it went okay with the stand-up, so he's going to keep it standing. So here we go. Step into the next 10 minutes, and they're going to stand up. Okay, and so Gordeau, this time, with 7 plus 7 is 14. And Frazier with a 5 plus 5 is 10, plus 2 is 12. So this time Gordeau actually ended up with the edge, even though it was close. It's a very slight edge. But now he's the one who has a chance to finish the fight in the second 10 minutes of the fight. So his killer instinct roll is going to be a 6, plus 6 is 12. Frazier is a 2. He needs to roll a 10 to survive here. And he doesn't. It's a 6. So Gordeau 12 minus Frazier 8 is a 4. So Gordeau actually gets the win after taking a little bit of a beating early. He hangs in there, survives, comes back to win after 10 minutes. So now what we know is that we're going to add 10 minutes to whatever our time is. So our time is, it was only 2 difference. So the 5-point difference, so it goes a good long while still. We're going to go 19 because we come down to 9, but we already know it goes at least 10 minutes. 19, 15. Like that. So almost 20 minutes. That's not entirely realistic for UFC 1, but whatever. And it was a stand-up finish. So let's take a look. And it was a 1-4 TKO. So Gordeau gets the TKO win. Already circled him. He's on into the finals, as he was in the real UFC 1. Alright, hang on a second. Sorry, this is kind of a long video to explain this game. But I think if you read the rules, watch the video, and make out a couple little cards like I have here, it'll go pretty quick. I'm explaining every single step of the way. Alright, so now we got the big matchup. It's not the finals, but it's the big matchup. Royce Gracie versus Ken Shamrock. Let's look at it. Let's match them up. Royce is a control 14, Ken's a control 12. So Royce has a slight edge at getting control. But Ken, at least according to the ratings I gave him, has a slight chance. He's got a little bit better stand-up than Royce. Royce has better ground game than Ken. So they're pretty evenly matched. Even though in the UFC 1, Royce clearly had the edge and caught Shamrock with a submission he just wasn't ready for. He came back when they fight again, UFC 5, 6, something like that. Alright, here we go. Let's see. Control. Royce 5, Ken 5. So Royce gains control. He's a 19. 14 plus 5 beats 12 plus 5. So Royce definitely wants it on the ground. And, oh, weak. Alright, so Royce, this is sad. Royce has a ground 15 plus 2 for control 17. He rolled a 3, 20. Weak. And Ken Shamrock rolled a 1 and has a 12 for ground. So Royce has a very good chance of an early finish here. Or a semi-early finish. Looks like it'll be about 4 minutes. But let's see, maybe he won't finish. Royce's killer instinct is 8, plus 5 is 13. Shamrock's toughness is 6, plus 6 is 12. 13 minus 12 is he did finish him. Time was, the difference is 7, so time is going to be 4 minutes and something. 4 minutes and 56 seconds, almost 5 minutes. And the ground finish for Royce is going to be, let's see, ground finish, was a 1. So it's a submission. Yep, that makes sense. And I got a special chart, like I said, for jiu-jitsu submissions. So let's see what he got. I roll a d20 for that. It's an extra roll. 13, guillotine choke. So 5 minutes in, probably what happened is that they went down for a bit. Ken was able to get back to his feet and then shot in and Royce caught him in a guillotine. That's the way I would envision that fight happening. So now we're down to the finals, and it is the finals that we saw in actual UFC 1. Royce Gracie, Gordeau. Royce Gracie has a big edge on paper. His real test was Shamrock, and he got through. Royce 8, control 14 is a 22. Gordeau 5 plus 7 is a 12. So Royce Gracie is getting it to the mat. Ooh. So Royce rolled an 8. Ground is 15. And plus 2 is a 25. Plus 2 for control. And Gordeau rolled a 19. So he made it a lot more competitive fight than it probably should have been. but Hoist still has the edge. Let's see if he can finish. Oh, he probably will here because oh, I forgot. Actually, totally forgot. Huh. I totally spaced it on a rule here. So I'll tell you guys now. But I totally spaced it. This is not, and I see why, because this is not a rule I had initially put into the game. But I felt like some of the fights, and they are, some of the fights were going too long. Well, I forgot that when it comes down to the finish, the Killer Instinct, I'm going to roll and I'll show you what I do. Killer Instinct, Hoist has an 8. He adds 10. Wow. And 8. So that's 18 plus 8 is 26. And he also adds 2 points for doing over 20 points of damage. So you add another point for every 10 points of damage. So 8 plus 2 is 10, plus 10 on the first roll is 20, 28. Wow. So he's going to get a massive finish here. And Gerard Gordeau then has a toughness of 2. And a 7 is 9. That's really bad. A 19. I haven't seen that before. So anyway, I hope you guys can see that was a bad example because I didn't do it till the last fight. But the idea is that adds the Killer Instinct roll, the finishing, adds how much damage they did in the fight too, to their, so that, I can't quite talk. So if they did a lot of damage, if they rolled high and have a high, whatever number for stand up or ground, then it's going to make it more likely that they finish that fight. So Hoist Gracie had no problem here. Let's see, what time did it take? Probably not much. That was actually a 3, so actually it was an 8-minute fight. So those lasted for quite a while, 8:57, almost 9 minutes. But the ground finish, Hoist was a 19 because he rolled that 10 also. So 10 plus is a submission. So we got a submission. Jiu-Jitsu submission is 20. Lapel choke or rare sub. Since Hoist actually has done a lapel choke, that's why I wrote that in here, because he's wearing a gi. That would make sense. But if it was a fighter who didn't have a gi on, I wouldn't go with the lapel choke. I would call it a whatever. There's a number of subs I have on a little list elsewhere: flying triangles and leg scissors and a scarf hold or something like that. You can come up with whatever you want for that stuff. I'm just trying to give it a little bit of flavor. So, Hoist Gracie, lapel chokes Gordeau in almost 9 minutes. Some of these fights took longer than I thought, but for the most part, that felt good. It felt realistic. So I hope that kind of shows you guys how you can do this game. This video was almost 40 minutes, but if I wasn't walking you through every step, the whole card would have taken 5 minutes. You know what I mean? It's a couple diamonds. I have created fighters for UFC 1, UFC 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think. Maybe 1993 and 94, and a few fighters from 95. So if you download my rule set, I've got fighters rated for all those. And I also did Pancrase fighters from 1993, where Ken Shamrock and Boss Rutan and Funaki and Suzuki. There's a handful of other guys. Vernon Tiger White. Jason DeLucia, who also fought in UFC 1, but he was an alternate, so I left him out of this card because I didn't want to create the guy he fought as an alternate bout. But I do have rules for injuries, too, based on how much damage they take in these fights. If I just skip that, it's just one extra thing to track. But for those who want a little bit more realism, there's definitely injuries in his game, especially on like a one-night tournament like that. Steve Jenham, anyone. So, anyway, I hope that's fun for you guys. I just wanted to kind of walk you through how the game goes, and our first UFC 1 champion is indeed Royce Gracie, as kind of expected. I don't want to say I won't do any more videos, but the whole point of this video was to show how the game plays out. So I might do UFC 2 and UFC 3 and whatnot, continue this on if there's any interest. But like I said, really I just kind of wanted to show how the game plays. So give you guys a chance to follow along and see, oh yeah, like I'm reading the rules, but now I kind of see how it flows, you know. You roll a 10-sided die and check for control. You roll a 20-sided die once they've decided if they're standing or on the ground. Oh, did he finish him? Yeah, he finished him. Let's see how. Oh, he didn't finish him? Okay, we're moving on to the next 10 minutes. You know, it's pretty quick once you get the hang of it. Alright, thank you guys for watching. I'm Bradu, and this is Bradu's Simple NHB.